Okay, Kellen, enough of the clickbait thumbnail fun stuff. Let's get into this engine strike on a 747-800 freighter UPS out of Taipei on the 13th of August. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the BLANCOLIRIO channel. And this video is brought to you by the folks that sponsor this channel here on Patreon so that I don't have to wear all this phony baloney stuff. Thank you for your support. Starting first with Simon Radecki's Aviation Herald. 747-800 at Taipei, August 13. Engine pod strike on landing. A UPS 747-800 freighter registered November 613 Uniform Papa flying from Hong Kong, China to Taipei was on its third approach to Taipei's runway 05 left in gusting winds at 8:08 local time, 12:08 Zulu, when the right-hand wing lowered after touchdown, causing the engine number 4, that's the outboard right engine nacelle, to contact the ground briefly. The aircraft rolled out without further incident and taxied to the apron. Engine number 4 received damage to its nacelle, and we'll look at the dramatic video that was captured of this. At the time of the incident, it looks like the winds here at 12:30 Z, winds 100 at 28 gusting to 41 knots. If we do a quick crosswind calculation, runway 05, wind direction 100 at 28 knots, gusting to 41, we've got a maximum crosswind component of just over 31 knots, right at the limit for the Boeing 747. On a statement put out by UPS here on Simple Flying, the UPS said, "We're aware of an incident involving our aircraft while landing during strong gusting winds associated with Typhoon Podol. We are working with investigative authorities as they review the event, and the aircraft is currently undergoing inspection and repairs and will return to service only after all safety protocols are met." If we go to Google Earth and back up the weather to the time of the incident, this Typhoon Podol was passing right by Taiwan as this incident occurred. The airport they're landing at is located up here on the north end of the island. And here we can see the winds that were occurring at the time of the accident. This is near the surface. And there is your right quartering strong crosswind as the winds are being drawn into this typhoon. Now let's take a look at this rather spectacular video captured of the night landing from behind the aircraft at Taipei. Unfortunately, some rather dreadful music was attached to it, so let's turn the audio off. We'll get into the physics and the procedures for these strong crosswind landings of the 747 here in a minute, but you can see the big crab to the right. Winds are coming from right to left. He's trying to keep the approach stabilized, but right there is the beginning of his problems. I'll explain that in a second. Bam, there goes the number 4 engine, and it sure looks to me like that number 1 engine took a hit as well, or very close to it. Go back and review this again. Again, the aircraft is crabbing into the wind. We'll get into a detailed discussion of how this is supposed to work in a moment. And I just want to show you where things go awry is a little bit of a flare here, little PIO in a little PIO with the elevator there. Right there. As that, you cannot allow the upwind wing to come up at all. That right wing is coming up. Maybe it's easier if we look at it like this. That right wing is coming up, and the wind's coming from this direction. You cannot allow that to happen. You have to keep the wing down into the wind, because as he reverses that, that's what gets the momentum going to roll that right wing and that number 4 engine right down into the concrete. There's also a little bit of a pitching moment, which is why he was able to tag the number 4 engine right there. Normally, the inboard engines are of greater threat of getting hit on the ground, as they are a little lower and closer to the ground because of the dihedral of the wings. But in this case, the pitch, the yaw plus the pitching moment allowed the number 4 engine to strike the ground first. And then there was a big ricochet off to the left, a left rolling action. And man, that number 1 engine sure came close to getting hit. So very demanding conditions. with this crosswind. And I'm surprised Kelsey hadn't jumped on this yet. Here's a picture of the number 4 engine after the fact. Would need a more detailed view to actually see what sort of damage occurred to the nacelle. Hopefully it's only nacelle damage and not engine or engine accessory damage. There's an excellent video here on how to land the 747 in a crosswind, both takeoff and landing. Pilot Obet does an excellent job of explaining how this is supposed to work and what the hazards are in dealing with these crosswinds. Looking at the Boeing 747 design, over the years, these engines became larger and larger high bypass turbofan engines. So these engine diameters got bigger and bigger over time, making these engines even closer to the ground. So the aircraft can handle very little angle before these engines strike the ground. And as I said earlier, it's usually these inboard engines that can strike the ground first. The 747 also has a much greater sweep to its wing than later models of aircraft like the 787 and 777, even the 757-67. They have less sweep. This sweep comes into play on these crosswind landings. Because of this lack of clearance here with the engines, you have to land these large jet aircraft in a bit of a crab, and the landing gear is designed to be able to handle that crab, and the landing gear will twist somewhat to take some of that crab out of the landing, and then once you land on the main wheels, you can decrab the aircraft and de-rotate, they say, or gently fly the nose down to the runway, and in that process, straighten the aircraft out, getting it going right down the runway. But during that process, you have got to keep the upwind wing down into the wind. Because as you are landing, in this case, with a right crosswind, the wind striking the aircraft from this direction, this swept back wing on the right is basically aimed straight into the wind, as opposed to this swept back wing on the left is swept back well away from the wind, the crosswind, the relative wind as the aircraft is flying down the runway. So in effect, this right wing, this upwind wing, is creating more lift. And as you decrab the aircraft, that changes the lift on the wings as well. So it's absolutely vital that you keep this upwind wing down into the wind. If you ever allow that wing to pick up, you're going to start losing your directional control down the runway, and you may very well easily drift downwind of center line of the runway. And also, too, as we saw in this example, if you let that upwind wing rise on you and you end up battling it back down, you're putting your controls to get it back down, and you're going to overshoot and smack that outboard engine. And it's a similar program when you're taking off in a strong crosswind. You get the aircraft rolling straight down the runway in that strong crosswind, that upwind wing is going to start generating lift, and you're going to need to start putting aileron into that wing to keep it down into the wind. Do not allow that wing to rise, and then you're going to eventually get that airplane crabbed into the wind and lifted off the ground almost simultaneously, and get that aircraft crabbing down the runway, keeping it on center line without letting that wing lift on you. And Captain Obet here does an excellent job in the simulator explaining all this in the 747 simulator. See the link below. So in this case, folks will be able to look at the data of the flight controls and tell exactly what kind of control inputs the pilot was doing. It's very hard to see in this dark video as to what the pilot was doing, but he's looking good until right about in here when he starts allowing that upwind wing to rise right in there, coupled with a little bit of pitch, nose down pitch, just sets him off to become unstabilized and eventually cause that engine strike. This is harder than it looks, and it takes a lot of good, subtle control inputs to keep things stabilized with such a large aircraft. It's very easy to get into a pilot-induced oscillation, either in roll, where you're rolling the aircraft back and forth, or pitch, where you're pitching the aircraft up and down, or getting both going at the same time, as we see a little bit going on here. Personally, I would have called in sick or just. This was the third time. This was the third attempt at the landing after 2 go-arounds. It might be time to divert and go somewhere else. Not everything has to be there overnight. Thank you so much for your support of your channel, of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon. This is your channel. See you here.